Welcome to the Today's Leader podcast. Building tomorrow's best leaders, today.
Way to go, guys. Way to go. Keep it going. Good job, guys. All right, Paul, I see you. All right, John, finish on. Coach Cole.
Great job, guys.
And it's my pleasure to welcome to the Today's Leader podcast, Building Tomorrow's Best Leaders. Today, please welcome the author of the best-selling book, The Code of Executive, Don Schmincke. How are you today, Don?
Great, thank you.
It's good to have you here on the podcast. Now, you've got a couple of things in the pipeline and a couple of things that specific topics that we'll be talking about today. But first up, let's just share a little bit about the Don Schmincke story.
How much time do we have for this? I started off as a planetary physicist at MIT and did a lot of different areas of research.
Yeah.
But I started studying humans, excuse me, and then I ended up having I automated the Harvard MIT biomedical lab. But when I went to Hopkins, I did my graduate work there, and then I started getting more involved with human grouping behaviors and how humans manage each other. And that's really where things took off, because I had a lot of executives that were, like emerging leaders, and they were in the executive MBA programs, and they were complaining about the failure rate of management theory, because we have all these neat best-selling books, but we don't end up seeing a lot of neat best-selling companies. And when you get on Google to look at the scholarly databases, the implementations are dismal.
Yeah.
So they asked me if this could be biological. And so it's when I began applying anthropology and the study of ancient civilizations and modern medical science to figure it out. And that's where it started. So
Wow.
here I am.
So, interplanetary physicist, and you've ended up researching and I suppose teaching and coaching CEOs. How did that come about? What was the big change there? Was it just curiosity that drove that?
I think it was, Oxford University gave me permission to use an ancient manuscript, and I published that while I was teaching at Hopkins. So that was a major shift as I started teaching this stuff, and I ended up getting a lot of support from various sectors. And so there was this ancient manuscript that the samurai had used to train their emerging leaders.
Okay.
And so like 700 years ago.
Wow.
So I published the book called The Code of the Executive. And The Code of the Executive was really, I tried to stay to the lines of the original text, but of course modernize it for us. And it was really great, because when we started teaching it started getting results. And so we began applying it to teams and executive groups, and we started seeing performance results double and triple. And so people thought, wow, that's interesting. We've had all the top consulting firms in here, and you've actually tripled productivity using an ancient method or a series of methods. So that's when I started being asked to teach and speak around the world.
It's fascinating that we can learn so much from, in this case, the samurai, because I know that here in Australia, for example, we have our Indigenous people, the Aboriginal, and they've been on this earth for way longer than what we have. In some cases, some people are saying they've been here for 60,000 years, which is quite phenomenal and totally mind-blowing when you think about it. But during that time, and I know that there's so little work being done around this, the leadership in some of these ancient civilizations, there's got to be things that we can learn from there, surely.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the patterns that have been used are pretty impressive, because when you look and you say, okay, how do you dominate a market in your lifetime?
Yeah.
What we found is that a lot of people weren't really looking at Alexander the Great or Cleopatra or Caesar or Genghis Khan. It was interesting that you couldn't look at them as these are CEOs that dominated a market. And so the point is, well, why not? And what can we do with that? And then the other point that I was challenged with is that's great, but what's the biological, what's the medical science, what's the genetic science behind it that made it work? And I was really fascinated by that. So, but the whole point is the proof in the pudding, right? You have to apply it and then see what the results were. So when we started seeing companies' sales go up 3, 5, or 10 times within a couple of years, people got really excited. It's like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, these theories can drive sales growth by magnitudes. It's like, yeah, they can. So it was kind of cool. And I ended up plowing all the money back into the research, and we just kept learning more and more.
And I'm imagining uncovering so much more that you can just then unleash and impact, the leadership world. Why doesn't leadership theory sort of work, or is as effective as what maybe it should be?
That's a good question. And it was one of the first things that we were trying to figure out. The anthropologists on our team really pointed us in some directions that we weren't expecting, because we looked at what was being published and taught, and it was like a lot of, what do I got to do to get results, and how do I do it, basically.
Yeah.
And so, the what stuff is what we need: goals and metrics and structure and all this. And the how stuff, do we have the right processes? Do we have the right systems? Do we have the right, all that. So anyway, I couldn't figure out why the results had such a high failure rate when it made so much sense. But what we discovered about 25 years ago into this, we were getting into this, that it was behavior wasn't changing. In other words, human decision was not shifting. So you could put $250,000, $1 million into some new theory, some new implementation, some new system. But if human decision does not shift, you have wasted everything, and you are now a failure, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the autopsies showed the problem was. The autopsies was nothing wrong with the what and how. It was that it didn't alter people's behavior, their beliefs. Now, and the beliefs are what drive behavior. So it was like, wait a minute, until you shift beliefs, you can't shift behavior.
Yeah.
That's when it all came together. So that's what happened.
So ultimately, the action or the do or the change behavior wasn't occurring. So even though the theories may be sound, it wasn't shifting mindset or beliefs that then transcribed into sustainable action.
Right. Yes. And that's why when you see these change programs that go through these companies and they leave, and then, the consultants, they take their millions of dollars, all you find left behind are cynical, sarcastic employees who just like, they can't wait for the boss to read a new book. We got to go through this again, right? So, so I train about 700 CEOs a year on how not to do that,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun because they begin to realize, like, oh wow, this is what's been missing, and I'm like, yeah, the autopsies show that this is a problem,
Yeah.
but the solution is artful to do. It's just not as easy as bringing in a new spreadsheet or a system or a software. It's really around the art of creating the beliefs of humans, and I found that to be the most elegant and effective way of driving profitable growth and change in a company.
I even like that word you're using, autopsy, because ultimately that's what it is. It's about understanding why something didn't work, and
Right.
I stand here guilty because when I was in the corporate world, I'd read it, I'd read something, I'd be impacted by it, I'd start putting it into practice, then I'd start teaching it with my team, and then sometimes the world would just stop and take over, and all of a sudden, what was new and exciting 3 months ago didn't seem so new and exciting now, and
Right.
so absolutely stand here guilty of that, but also it's part of the learning as a leader. You've got to understand, I guess, you've got to model the way as opposed to teach the way. And when,
Yeah.
one of the leaders that I've had a little bit to do with, a gentleman from the States called Max Story, he talks all about role modeling. He's got to see the impact. He's got to show the impact first before he will ever go out there and teach it. And I think that's a really positive sense, because then he can at least
Yes.
say, well, this is what I do and this is how I do it.
Yes.
So when you look at the samurai, How has the human psyche shifted since those times to now? And what are the similarities and what can we learn from that?
Well, it hasn't really shifted.
Okay.
In other words, our bodies are, a couple million years old, and it's not, you can hit a reset button and download a new software upgrade to your brain. So a lot of what we're doing, and a lot of the stuff that like Dr. David Buss pioneered, and he's got his newer books coming out on evolutionary psychology, dig into this in a very big way. And I'm hoping to maybe do some publishing with David later on. But the thing that I've learned from studying his research and a lot of the papers that have come out from other scientists is that a lot of what's going on in our bodies have been doing that for millions of years. And we've just been trying to ignore it or cover it up with modern theory or culture, but it's still sitting there laughing at us. It's like, so I think, like when I do my workshop, I have this workshop for 3 hours I do with CEOs. And like I said, I train about 700 a year and in these small groups. And what's really cool is I get into this and they really understand it. They're like, wow, that makes perfect sense. It's like, well, why are people selfish? Why are we having political games going on in our companies? And I come back to, well, we're designed for that by genetic warfare, and here's how genetic warfare works, and the animal has to replicate. It has to be selfish so that it can outmaneuver the other animals. And we back it into their culture as a company. And they say, wow, it's the ego, isn't it? It's exactly. The ego is designed to promote selfishness for winning genetic warfare.
Yeah.
But how you override it, this is when we bring in the samurai stuff. This is why it hasn't really changed, because when we use these samurai techniques today from centuries ago, it works.
Yeah.
And so when you teach an executive team how to die properly, or how to remember death, it actually shifts part of the brain to where the ego gives up and they can operate with bravery and honor. And I think it's one of the interesting breakthroughs about our research is applying bravery and honor where you can measure the results based on sales growth of the company and performance of the company, where there might be maybe productivity is at a certain level, but a lot of that productivity is being wasted or distracted by dysfunctional behaviors, and that vanishes. Like we can remove 50% of that waste within 4 to 6 months using these techniques. So it's been really fun. I mean, as a scientist, I really have enjoyed discovering these things and then applying these things in corporations.
Yeah, I can imagine. And the insights that you're giving to, say, an emerging leader that's wanting to really progress in their career, how can what you teach or what you've written about in the Code of the Executive, how can they use, I suppose, what's in that, what is most beneficial for them to take away now to get them ready to take the next step and grab your book and move on in their career?
Right. Well, I think the basic model would be look at how to alter or shift or craft the beliefs of humans. Okay, because when you can craft the beliefs of the people that you're leading, you can alter their decisions and their behaviors. But it's the one course that's missing in all of our institutional work. And when you read like the samurai work, you can see how their teachings were really around, what beliefs do we have to get, like what do we have to let die in order to create what's next? Now, when I did the book with Chris Warner, the NBC special on the K2 Summit, we wrote the book live where people were up there and some did die. So, K2 is it's the death mountain, right? And so in the book, we were able to observe and document ways to look at the dangers of leadership. And in each of those cases, it's, how can the leader, alter the beliefs of people for a positive outcome? And so that was a great book. I had a lot of fun writing that with Chris. But that's the point, really, is if we lead from just what and how, we're just looking at tools.
Yeah.
And tools don't give us salvation. They're just tools. Using the tools requires a decision, requires a behavior.
Yeah.
And that's not driven by the tool. That's driven by believes.
Yeah.
That was the most amazing breakthrough, and we've applied it in companies in hundreds of industries, and it's worked, and their performance results have been measurable, which is a little bit different than management theory, where you say we're going to do this theory, it's great, and at the end of the day, okay, did sales double? Well, no, they didn't. Well, did productivity go up by magnitudes? Well, no, it didn't. It's like, well, what do we do this for? If there's not an impact.
Yeah.
But with this, it gave us a direct line to measurable impact.
Yeah. And that's so important because, that return on investment for any sort of leadership development is one of those hindrances, I guess, for companies to move into that because they can never be sure of that ROI. So when you can actually have a direct and tangible link back to, a decent sized sales increase, I think there's your ROI. So the other thing that I just want to touch on or dive into a little bit is your course called How to Slay Dragons. Now, wasn't there a Disney movie of that particular name, Don? So
I don't know. I haven't looked at it. I should probably go back and see.
So tell me
But
about How to Slay Dragons.
what's interesting, Mark, I actually have two. During COVID, I decided to, as you see my studio here, convert the cigar room into a studio. And I started filming and doing courses because I thought everybody wants this information. So the first course I put together was How to Become Samurai. Becoming Samurai was the name of the course. And Becoming Samurai was implementing what I just discussed. So somebody could take this course and actually go through and apply exercises and meet with their managers and get feedback and do all the fear and death and emerging in honor and bravery. But then Mark Levy, who is a brand genius, he helped Simon Sinek. I don't know if you remember Simon Sinek and Start With Why. He's the guy that figured that out for Simon. So he came to me and I hired him. And it was in the middle of looking at my material. And I said, I want to get this out to the masses, not just executives like Becoming Samurai, but what would the masses use? How could I apply this value to the world? And he said, I think it's about dragons. And what was really, really interesting is it kind of took off as a concept. And you think about it, he goes, these are dragon problems people have. It's not the average problem. It's the problem that's a ferocious problem. It's like chronic. It's lingering. It's blocking your path. It could be like a dead-end job, a bad marriage, addiction. I mean, just go through these problems in life where we're just stuck. And using these samurai techniques, we were able to put together this course on how to slay dragons, meaning what's the dragon stopping you, and how to break the chain, and because it's around attachment and death, and done in a nice, educational but entertaining way, but in a way that can be applied immediately.
Yeah.
And I've had people come up to me and say, "Wow, it just changed my life. I was so stuck and attached to this thing."
Yeah.
And so. That's what that's about.
And I love the branding behind it. It talks about the most horrifying problems that are stopping us from truly achieving success and happiness. So if that doesn't grab attention, I don't know what is. So How to Slay Dragons. So that's awesome. So what does this thing look like for you moving forward? Where does this all go? So what's the vision, I guess, for yourself there, Don?
I just want to continue doing the two things that are really my life purpose, which is to learn and teach. And by learning, continue to do expeditions and excursions around the world to find things that, aren't normal knowledge, and then teach by doing things like this, podcasts on great shows like yours, and doing speeches at conferences and corporations and online courses and facilitating retreats where we actually implement everything in a company. That's what I love to do more of and continue that, because that's for me that's fun and it's meaningful.
Yeah. So obviously you are well versed to research. So a question I'll often ask my guests is, what is the book that's had the most impact on your career? But I guess I'm thinking about what's been the research or potentially the book that has had the most impact on you.
Yeah, there's not really one book. I think what the main impact on me came from looking at evolutionary psychology in our species and why we behave the way we do, and kind of dig deeper than the normal trendy stuff. You know, we're all thinking, well, is it nature versus nurture? And but it's like, well, like nature gave us the capacity to nurture.
Yeah.
So let's go deeper into that and discover things that may be politically incorrect, but scientifically defensible. And even though it's politically incorrect, could we use it? I mean, maybe not everybody has potential. Maybe they have potential within a certain band of width of their thinking. You know, how do we apply that for maximum impact and fulfillment of their lives and the lives of companies? Yeah, so we got into some really cool stuff. But the more that I learned at it from a scientific viewpoint, the more exciting it became.
Yeah, yeah. With you use the words politically correct. Is that something that we should look at, or I mean, there's a lot of trepidation around saying the wrong thing, offending people,
Yeah.
you know, all those sorts of things. And we seem to be a world where a lot of people are now walking on eggshells because we don't want to
Yeah.
upset people.
Yeah.
What's the answer? What's the answer to that? How can we sort of find that balancing act, I suppose, where we are looking at, you know, the studies and the research that indicates certain things, and then how do we give people opportunity, provide opportunity? It's such I know it's a broad question and not very well asked. I might throw that in as well, but it's such a minefield in so many ways. How do we navigate that?
Well, what I think is it's at what part of life are we participating in? Now, you know, I get it. If you're at a country club or a public social event, you want people to feel comfortable. You want to have a certain level of culture and dignity. It's like that. But when you're dealing with facts and data, like if you're trying to produce a result and you can accept that to be able to grow, something must die. And that's how change happens, you know.
Yeah.
Because if nothing's going to die, there's no change. Just keep going with what you've got.
Yeah.
So any sort of change means the death of something. And that can be hard. People think, hey, growth is cool and fun. No, growth is painful. We started when we did High Altitude Leadership with Chris Warner, the book I mentioned earlier. In High Altitude Leadership, I think the first line we have is like leadership sucks. You know, it's just like, they just get used to it. You know, all those motivational things you thought it was, and it's not that at all. And yeah, that's really it. Yeah, you're going to do things that are not popular. It's going to be politically incorrect. It's going to go against the grain, and that's how progress is made. And when we stop doing that, progress is going to stop.
Yeah. And I guess that's also the fear of so many people, that we just, there are some things that we just can't stop. But anyway, moving on. So tell me about the inspiration behind your journey. Was it a person? Was it just your quest for research? Who's been your inspiration?
Oh, it's a number. You know, I'm standing on the shoulders, as they say, of many giants of thinkers that have been out there. I mean, I was, you know, when I was at MIT and started looking at quantum physics and all that, but also looking at how the arguments were between scientists around reality, really gave a great foundation for moving forward. And like the discourses between Carl Jung and Pauli, a physicist, and where they were starting to link, you know, the mind and matter together, still leading edge thought, and some of it we're actually applying in the laboratory now. That was probably a good foundation. So when I ended up getting into leadership studies and looking at how belief impact on results, you know, I had a foundation of that background of science to say, wait a minute, how does this really work? How can we test this? How can we use it? And that was cool. I mean, I really think science gave me a way to connect diverse thoughts and research areas and pull them together into something where a CEO could just drive their performance to much higher levels than they ever thought. And to me, it's just the methods that are used. It's nothing. I don't have any brand new philosophy. I'm just using the stuff that's been used by Alexander the Great and and Caesar and Genghis Khan. That's not, I'm just codifying it.
Yeah.
It's like, here's why it worked,
Yeah.
and it works today. So you look at the companies today that are dominating their markets. So how does a company go into a market and they're a startup, and in their lifetime, they dominate the market? Like nobody's ever asked that question. But I asked, and I was able to correlate it with what's been going on for thousands of years.
Your insights are fascinating, Don, and I'm thinking about it from a leadership perspective especially. And, a lot of leaders get told you've got to have a personal growth plan, you've got to be looking to develop yourself. And many of the questions that they ask is, well, where do I start? And, when I'm talking with someone like you that is so well versed in the world of research, where does a leader or an aspiring or an emerging leader start to look for some of this research so that they can get that curiosity, put it into action from what they're learning? So what's a good starting point? Because in many cases they don't know what they don't know, and they have a want and a desire, I guess, to learn more and put it into action. What are some of the tips that maybe you could give an emerging leader as to where to start, what to look for?
I think you start with the results, the desired results you want to produce, and then you work backwards. Like what's stopping that result from happening, or what's causing it to happen.
Yeah.
And what you then can do is look at what are the behaviors or decisions that are occurring that are furthering the desired results. And if there's a problem there, then you got to look at, well, how do I shift those beliefs to alter those behaviors to make that happen? And then you can pull in a number of tools to help support that, but it's in the context of getting humans to do something. That's really the whole thing. And then when you look at change, it's where you start there is what has to die. If something doesn't die, if we don't disconnect from the old way we were doing it, how can we possibly make progress forward? So getting comfortable with change and what has to end for new things to begin is also a good philosophy to look at as well.
Excellent. So what's your relationship like with the word or the concept of failure?
Valium?
Failure.
Oh, failure. I thought you said
Sorry.
the Valium. I'm like,
It's that Australian accent coming out.
All right. No, I think failure is a perfect link with the death concept.
Yeah.
When you think about it, it's like, if something has failed, what do we learn from that? And I had a lot of failures through this research because a lot of times I thought, well, this is great. This is going to work. We go in and we try to implement it, and it went sideways. And it's like, oh, geez, what went wrong? And how do we figure this out again? And we learned each time, so I think having thousands of deaths is the way to say we've had thousands of failures, and we need to use that as a way to figure out what was missing and learn from it. And I forget who said it. It might have been one of the boxers or something, or maybe a basketball player. I should get the name, but you could look it up. It's like I never fail. I always learn.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key.
Yeah.
That is the key. And it has been for me. It's like I never fail. I always learn. And in science, most of what we're doing is testing something to see what's working and what's not. Most of the time, it's not working. But we learn from each time that happens.
Yeah. Hey, what have you accomplished that you're most proud of, Don?
I think the impact on people that come up to me and say, wow, this was different, or this changed either my life personally or changed me as a leader, and these are the results I was able to produce. As a teacher, that's what you want to hear. That's validation that what I'm teaching makes a difference and is meaningful. And it gives you the energy to keep going, to keep pushing it forward.
Excellent. So how can people connect with you or your course or grab a hold of some of your books?
Sure. Well, Amazon in my name, it'll pull the books up on there, or Barnes and Noble. one of any of the big distributors. The website we have is SAGA Leadership, which we stole from the Vikings, SAGA, the Saga, right? SAGAleadership.com, and that'll take you into the courses we have, the speeches that I do, and things like that.
Excellent, no worries. And I'll make sure those links are in the show notes. Don, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for investing in today's leaders.
Thank you for having me.
If you're looking to build better leadership skills, check out the Today's Leader website at todaysleader.com.au. We really are driving a leadership revolution to build tomorrow's best leaders today. Today's Leader is a collective, the mindset to make a difference, the ability to create an impact. Think and Grow Business hosts our Today's Leader Masterminds. Think and Grow Business, where we focus on personal, professional, and business growth. Book your free 30-minute discovery call right from the homepage at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au. Don't forget, wherever you are standing stronger, braver, and wiser. Don't forget the golden rule. Don't be an arsehole. I'll see you all again next week. Bye for now.